All right. Hi, everyone. I just want to thank you for joining us in the USACE Sustainability webinar series. I am Jansen Moon, headquarters USACE architect, and I'll be emceeing today's presentation titled ASHRAE 90.1 2019, a breakdown of updates and changes with a focus on demonstrating compliance via the performance rating method, the PRM. So I'm actually truly excited that we are having this presentation today because the 2022 NDA has required the DoD to use the latest energy consensus codes and standards, specifically ASHRAE 90.1 2019. So as this version becomes incorporated into federal code and the Unified Facilities Criteria, the UFCs, we should familiarize ourselves with the changes with this new version of ASHRAE 90.1. So here with us today, we have Mr. Erik Metz, who will be presenting. Mr. Erik Metz is a building research engineer at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, PNNL, and he has been focused on improving the built environment and reducing its impact. This has included participation in the Federal Energy Management Program's rulemaking, audits, and healthy building efforts, as well as developing the reference manuals for ASHRAE 90.1. Erik is also considered a decarbonization subject matter expert and thought leader, contributing to the plans to decarbonize the PNNL campus through their N0 projects. Prior to joining PNNL, Erik handled the technical aspects of energy and sustainability at a boutique consulting firm for over 7 years, focusing on bringing implementable solutions to developers, building operators, and corporations the most ambitious goals and challenging projects. He holds a BS in physics and astrophysics from the University of Michigan and an MS degree in applied physics from Columbia University. So I'll be passing over, Erik, I'll be passing it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Jansen. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear.
Wonderful. So I am very happy to be here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is energy and saving energy ultimately. And I see building codes as opportunity. And that's one of the reasons why I get excited about talking about ASHRAE 90.1 and adopting it and using it in the right way. Particularly with new construction, you know, there's a million options out there. You can design buildings in so many different ways these days. And we have some guidance now in terms of what we can do. So I'm going to start the presentation. I would like to keep it relatively informal, if that's okay. I encourage everyone to ask questions as we go. I'll try to take it slow. That being said, the updates to ASHRAE, and we're really talking about 2 code cycles of updates because essentially we're going from 90.1 2013 all the way to 2019. So there are a lot more changes than what we can capture in this hour that we have today. So I'm going to just focus on a couple, the main being how we demonstrate compliance and what it means moving forward. But I also encourage everyone, there are other presentations and breakdowns that literally go through every single thing that's been updated in the 16 and 19 code, but that's like almost a 2-day event to explain that to everyone. So individual sections, we're not going to get into too much aside from how we demonstrate compliance in this presentation. So agenda about code compliance. Again, we're jumping right into ASHRAE 90.1 2019, essentially skipping over the 2013 version. We'll talk about a little bit how it's more stringent. We'll talk about how Appendix G has changed with the performance rating method. It is intended to be more of a one-stop shop for not only different programs that you may be working with, but also for the future. And at the end, depending on how much time we have, we're going to go through the performance-based compliance forms, which is a new resource that just came out in the last year and a half. So not everyone will be aware of them, but it can really be a great tool, not only for modelers, but for people reviewing models, et cetera. So right off the bat, we'll talk about this plot here for a little bit. And here we're talking, this is a history, if you will, of ASHRAE Standard 90.1, where we're just going back to 2004. And for those who have attended a lot of energy modeling trainings or ASHRAE trainings, you've probably seen plots like this in the past. You know, we can go all the way back to the 70s when we first started implementing codes. But for this instance, we're starting at 90.1 2004. That's where things really got modernized, quote unquote. And what we're showing here in the upper blue line is relative performance normalized to 90.1 2004. So that's our 100% there. And the little blue percentages are the improvements in each version of the code as we step in 3-year cycles. So from 2004 to 2007, we had a 3.9% improvement in that code, meaning the 2007 code was 3.9% more stringent than the 2004 code, and so on and so forth. The biggest change being from 07 to 10. That was an 18% improvement. Some of you who remember those adoptions may remember some growing pains there. That was some good stuff. Then we had some 8.7, 8.2% improvements, and we've actually slowed down a little bit as we've sort of identified and plucked all the low-hanging fruit. The orange line is representing the target zone based on the federal rule, which is covered in 10 CFR 433, which means the target of our new construction in buildings in the federal sector is 30% below the code. So we show that as well. But again, the gist of it for what we're talking about right now is 2019 is 4.3% more stringent than the 16 version and 12.1% more stringent than the 13 version. So we do have some work cut out for us in you know, our new designs and complying with it. The green down here is a little added bonus that I put in. The LEED is kind of seen as a very well-known reference standard for building sustainability, and their energy credits use ASHRAE Standard 90.1, and you can kind of see where they've been at. And we'll talk specifically about how LEED treats 90.1 2019 with this pilot credit. It's called LEED Energy and Atmosphere Pilot Credit 111, where they essentially adopt this performance rating method into LEED version 4. So we'll talk specifically about how they do that and apply the new modeling methods to a publicly recognized rating system. All right. There we go. A quick little reference here. This is energy code adoption by state, where we can kind of see how everything has been doing. There are still a lot of states out there with 2013 as the basis, but 2019 is, you know, starting to, you know, come in and get adopted by a lot of different states. Well, and this is actually a somewhat live plot from the Building Energy Code program that is housed at Pacific Northwest National Lab, and it gets updated whenever the states sort of update their codes. But you can kind of see there are some stragglers out there, some doing well. But the whole point of this and the stable baseline and PRM method that we're going to be talking about is we can now use this method to show compliance with essentially any of these codes, which is a really good thing. So some quick background here. This is the problem that we've faced in codes for a while now. And the frustrating thing in the past was, you may have one project that has lots of different goalposts, right? And these are just listing a few. And some of those goalposts have different, baselines. And so as an energy modeler, which is what I did for longer than I'd like to admit, you sometimes have to do many different models for the same building, and it gets really frustrating. It's a time sink and a money sink ultimately. And so moving forward, they're trying to fix this more or less by having this prescriptive baseline or this new baseline. So traditionally, through 2013, Standard 90.1 included 2 paths for compliance. And I want to be very clear in this presentation because even for people with experience in the energy modeling world, sometimes we get a little lost in terms of what we are doing this for. There's compliance with the code, and ASHRAE 90.1 is structured in such a way that there are prescriptive requirements built into that code for HVAC, for envelope, for lighting, etc. And you can reference those parts of your code for design standards or what you are purchasing for your project, etc. But when you are showing compliance with that code, there are a couple of different methods that you can do. One is just straight up prescriptive. I am going to just do every single thing that's listed in chapters 5 through 10 of ASHRAE 90.1, and I'm going to say that I'm doing all of those things. This was relatively easy back in 2004, 2007. You have your lighting power densities, you have your equipment efficiencies, you just kind of fill it in. This is what the ComCheck or ResCheck software is based in, just saying, okay, I'm doing all these things and I'm meeting the code, so you should give me my building permit or my certificate of occupancy, whatever it may be that I'm working towards, and I have done this. Well, all of these, performance improvements that we talked about over here, this 18 and 7 and 8%, they came at a cost of complexity. And we started addressing different parts of the code, such as control requirements and occupancy responding issues, sensors, etc. Basically, it's gotten a lot harder in 2019 to prescriptively comply with the code. And even before that, even the 2010 version, the 2013 version. So there's also this energy cost budget method. This is a modeling method where you would essentially model your baseline design, model your proposed design, and as long as your proposed design is using less money than your baseline, you comply. But that was not approved for above and beyond. It's this beyond code programs that really became the problem. And that is our goal in the federal government, is to go 30% beyond the code. And so that's where Appendix G and the performance rating method comes into play. So it's similar to ECB. You're still doing an energy model, but it's more flexible. It wasn't for code compliance prior to 2016. It was used for LEED, these different ASHRAE standards. This is where you have your trade-offs. And if traditionally, you would only use this rating method if you needed trade-offs, right? You couldn't meet the code prescriptively because your client wanted only single pane windows or something like that. I don't know what it may be. But the actual you wouldn't comply with that prescriptively. But if you had a really, really good boiler, you could potentially make up for those single pane windows. And the performance rating method allowed for you to do that. But it did involve a more complicated modeling process. So, there were give and takes to all of it. But, each program had different rules. And then it comes down to what we in the codes program call AHJs, which is the authority having jurisdiction, can say whether, what you can do or what you can't do. But it is confusing, expensive, difficult to master, not so many software solutions, etc. So what codes has been working towards is, getting rid of this complexity, streamlining things, and making it all a little bit easier to work with different masters, if you will. So answering some questions in the chat. Let's see. Yep. The current federally adopted is ASHRAE 90.1 2013. That is correct. We actually just published for public comment the update to 10 CFR 433, which will be updating it to ASHRAE 90.1 2019. The effective date for that, I believe, is April 6, 2023, because you get a year to adopt it. So that is coming and is some, nice news. DoD is ahead of that. Percentage improvements are based on measured reality or through simulation. So all of these percentage improvements that we are talking about is based on energy modeling and simulation, and including the improvements for one code to the next. Each of those code improvements actually has a full analysis and determination where you can even break it down by building type. It will even tell you like how much warehouses got better, how much hospitals got better, etc. PRM method only requires simulation, not M&V. That is correct. There is no measurement and verification part to this. It is just based on the new construction of the building. Source for energy code adoption map, absolutely. That will, I believe it's in the notes to the slides. It is on the Building Energy Codes website, which I'll pull up at the end if we have time. And this will be true for all federal agencies. Indeed, DoD falls under federal agencies and the jurisdiction of 10 CFR 433. So all agencies will need to adopt 90.1 2019 as their energy, as their baseline, essentially. All right. So again, this is just another figure of our moving target here. The stringency changed. We have lead on here kind of as our baseline, but the new versions kind of made it so, my design might comply with lead 2009, but it didn't V4, and what is better, 40% below 2004 or 30% below 2007? It's probably pretty close to the same, but the only way to really know is to get in there and change your energy model and adopt it. So it is a problem that we are intending to solve with this. Sorry, my slides are a little bit slow. All right, so through 2013 for compliance, and again, compliance is different than beyond code, and it's something that I just don't think is stressed enough in these sort of trainings. There are two different paths, one for basic compliance, which is you comply with 90.1, and the second one for going above and beyond. I'm going to keep saying that because it matters. Appendix G is independent, which is a really great thing moving forward, whereas the ECB baseline is dependent on the proposed design. You may hear that the new baseline that has come out is a stable independent baseline, meaning it doesn't matter so much what the systems are in your building, the baseline is going to remain the same no matter what. All right, so fixed baseline. This is the big thing of what we're talking about here. So fixing the baseline so that we really only have to do one baseline model and hopefully only one proposed model. This was introduced beginning in 90.1 2016. And the point is one rule set for many purposes. If you have multiple things that you need to be doing, federal tax incentives, energy code compliance lead, all of this can just use the same model, if you will. The way that ASHRAE 90.1 works is they will come out with the standard 90.1 2016 in this case. And then ASHRAE will publish addendas to the standard. And each addendum proposes changes to the standard, generally that make it more stringent or fix loopholes or introduce new topics into the standard. In ASHRAE 90.1 2016, it was this addendum DM, I believe, is the one that introduced this stable baseline and performance cost index. So if you just open 90.1 2016 and you go into Appendix G, you will not see this. You need to open the addendum, and in order for a authority having jurisdiction to use the stable baseline with the 2016 code, they have to adopt the addendum, which is what New York State did, for instance. So that's an important detail. Basically, what happens is then when they do the next version, like 2019, they will start incorporating the actual addendum into the code. There are chances to comment and debate whether an addendum should be accepted or rejected. But most of the time, they are accepted and then formally integrated into the code, and that is what results in the changes, i.e. the improvements in stringency or changes in methodology like the one we are talking about today. All right, checking on the questions. Yes, simulations will always be different than what is happening in reality, and it basically just comes down to how good your energy model was, how good your modeler is. You know, no matter what, it's going to be different because it's a model, and you have to make simplifying assumptions in order to take something that's real and put it into the computer. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good. But some of the forms out there, like the compliance forms, can really help that by introducing some standardization in how you are doing the modeling and hopefully improve that accuracy. For DoD work, what is the difference between the international code and 90.1 and why I refer to both? I do not know the answer to that question, so I will not answer it. In general, in the federal sector, the international code is used for 10 CFR 435, which is the residential code, and ASHRAE is used for the commercial code. So it's just a little bit different. Note in that residential buildings, multifamily residential buildings of a certain size are considered commercial buildings. So most of the time, like our dorms and barracks and larger sort of residence type buildings fall under a commercial building in ASHRAE 90.1. Whereas more single family homes, duplexes, townhouses fall under the international code. But again, that's from the federal guidance, not necessarily the UFC. Has DOE accepted the 2016 version? No, we are skipping the 2016 version, going right to the 2019 version. But you will see a lot of 2016 listed in this presentation because the performance cost index, the stable baseline, was introduced in 2016 addendum DM. That was the first time you could officially use it, and it is fully formally in the 2019 version of the ASHRAE code. All right. Moving on, fixed baseline. So this is what we're talking about. This is the actual code reference in ASHRAE 90.1, 4.2.1.1. New buildings shall comply with either the provisions of sections 5 through 10. That's like your comm check or your res check. You're just ticking all the boxes, which now has a whole bunch of control requirements that are quite tricky for HVAC. Section 11, the energy cost budget method, that is your dependent baseline that requires energy modeling, meaning your baseline systems change based on the selection of your proposed systems. And now you have Appendix G, performance rating method, which can formally be used for base code compliance in addition to above and beyond. That is a, technical inclusion, but an important one at that, meaning that for whatever reason, if you are trying to or need to demonstrate just base compliance with the code, you can do it using Appendix G now. You do not have to do any other sort of res check or comm check or anything like that. All right, so our fixed baseline. Good news, the baseline is now back to 2004. Woohoo! It's going to be easier, right? Well, not exactly. They still are setting performance targets for the different codes. You just have to be a certain amount better than those codes. So for 2010, you were like, 26% better. For 2016, a little bit better. 2019, et cetera. You keep going down, but that baseline stays the same. And what they call this is the PCI, Performance Cost Index. So this basically is the proposed building performance over the baseline building performance. A PCI of 1 would be a building that only complies with ASHRAE 90.1 2004. A PCI of 50 would be 50% better than 2004. A PCI of 0 would be net 0. So this is changing with each version of the code, but the great thing about it is you can use the same modeling to demonstrate compliance. So if you have a state that's giving you trouble and calling you out and saying your buildings aren't very good, you can use your same building, your same PCI to say, actually, we are meeting your ASHRAE 90.1 2010 code because we're meeting 2019 or whatever that may be. And this will continue, then the PCI target will continue to go down for each version of the code subsequently. 2022 will be lower than 2019. 2025 beyond that will be even lower. So for compliance, your PCI needs to be less than your performance cost index target. And that target, we say it's 1, but there's a little bit more to it than that. That's the simplest case where you have a building without any mixed use types and all that sort of stuff. We do have some more detailed calculations there. So the PCI target, this is what we're talking about here. This is the equation down at the bottom. This is what you actually have to beat. And what we have here is a factor here called our BPF. This is our building performance factor. And if you all walk away from this presentation and only can remember 2 things from it, I would recommend you remember what the performance cost index is, because that's what we're going up against now, and this building performance factor, because that's going to be the most important thing that affects your performance cost index. So essentially, your target is your baseline building unregulated energy consumption, and I will get into this on the next slide, plus your building performance factor times your baseline building regulated energy consumption, all over your baseline building performance. So essentially what this says is we are taking out unregulated energies. Yes, this is our plug loads, our process loads, etc. And we are acting our performance factor on our regulated energy consumption. This is our HVAC efficiencies. It's essentially what's covered in the 90.1 chapters 5 through 10, our envelope, our lighting, our ventilation, etc., is all covered in the regulated energy consumption. Now, again, these are, somewhat open to interpretation in terms of what is regulated and unregulated by authorities having jurisdiction. For instance, in multifamily housing, many times the lighting loads in the units is often treated as unregulated energy, but the authorities having jurisdiction will pull that into regulated, and that's okay. Again, whoever is, approving these models and doing whatever the modeling needs to be done for can, sort of change these. This is just the overall framework. So these are the updated building performance factors for ASHRAE 2019. And essentially, it is a ratio that is lowering the regulated consumption for your target. So again, our PCI target includes the building performance factor acting on your baseline regulated energy. And putting it in the end goal is that your PCI has to be less than your PCI target. So what this is saying, their building performance factor, is that for an office building in climate zone 4A, your baseline building regulated energy consumption must be better than 51% of what the 2004 level was. So again, we're taking this number, Office 4A, and we're plugging that BPF into this calculation here and saying our regulated energy consumption of a 2019 building must be, in this case, I guess it's 49% better than what it was in 2004. And we have this lovely table with all of the climate zones and the different building areas. Indeed, there are lots of opportunities for savings in process loads, and it is up to the authority having jurisdiction whether or not they want to cover them. Some are easy, like you say, fume hoods, etc. Some are not so easy, such as industrial loads. So in general, ASHRAE being a governing body just couldn't get into all the different types of loads, but they have added a few here and there. All right, how does 30% improvement play into the BPFs and PCI targets? Very good question. So in theory, the PCI target would be lowered by 30%. Technically, there is a little bit more to it than that. And really the building performance factors are what should be lowered in that manner. But Daniel, that is a very good question. There is going to be additional guidance on that, but for the most part, what you're doing is just saying, okay, my actual performance cost index, my PCI, is less than my performance cost target by that 30% value. Modified BPFs, yeah. You can get into modified BPFs, but LEED, for instance, and we'll get into this, just goes into improving the overall performance cost index. They don't get into modifying the actual performance factors. I can't get rid of the lead. I don't know. That's not mine. So this is what lead does. Now, this is a little bit different than what we've been talking about before. So this is our lead pilot credit. This is lead pilot credit 111. This is for lead version 4, which is the current governing version of lead. Some of you may have some 2009 legacy projects out there that are different, but for the most part, this is what people will be using. And they've basically adopted the stable baseline. And what they did is they created their own building performance factors here. And the reason why, and I may escape out of the presentation mode just to switch back and forth a little more quickly here, is this improvement. Lead v4 is based on 90.1 2010, right? So, you have to be 5% better than 90.1 2010, and then you get all sorts of lovely points going above and beyond that. But the performance factors were really published. This one is for 2019. There's a similar table for 2016, but LEED has essentially created their own building performance factors for 2010 because codes never did that because this didn't exist for 2010. So that may be something that they adopt in the future if there is a demonstrated need for it. But it would have to be all of the states up here that are still using 2010 or 27 as their baseline to say, hey, we need BPFs for that, which isn't super likely. So we are getting here. So LEED created their own building performance factors, and interestingly enough, LEED did not even go so far as to have different climate zones, and they don't have all the same building types. But you can see here the building performance factor for new construction is 0.72 for LEED, whereas for 2019, if you did an office, it varies from 0.49 to 0.51. So going back to this, your performance cost index target for 2019 would have the lower factor here for BPF, that's your 0.5, but for LEED, it would be higher because your BPF is 0.72. So when you go and do your cost savings for showing that your actual performance cost index is less than your target, you would have a higher target for LEED based on their 2010 baseline and a lower target for 90.1 2019 compliance. Either way, you would have to be there, but you would have a larger gap based on the higher BPF. Let's see. Okay. So summary. The 2019 and 2016 version of Appendix G with Addendum BM offers the benefits. Again, it's only in 2019 and 2016 that this started. Third option for compliance, which is nice. You don't have to do any other modeling or anything to show just base compliance if you had to do that. You're dedicating your energy modeling to a single approach as opposed to multiple functions. So hopefully they can improve that accuracy. The nice thing is the creation of tools that automate the simulation process as the market is increased. This already exists for some tools, for some baselines. It's essentially automating the baseline process. This is expected to get much better in the near future in terms of you will be able to go into a modeling software and enter the details of your building. This is mostly use types, sizes, climate zones, etc. and it will be able to generate automatically the baseline building for you. And then you can play with it and do your proposed design on top of it, and it should make for earlier and better adoption of the modeling in the process, so that we're not having, oh, add an error in the model at the last minute once it was reviewed and our savings changed and all that sort of good stuff. So that is a nice improvement. All right, let's see. Go back here. So the compliance forms. I hate that they're called this, but that is their basic use. But for me, the best way to use these is more as a guide and a reference point for modeling a fixed baseline project. These are new as of, like I said, about a year and a half ago. They have process overview lists, a lot of good stuff that the modelers can use while developing the model. And I really do like them, not only for just the reviewer's standpoint, but for the developer's standpoint. The nice thing is they do this calculation for you, your PCI, your PCI target, and your building performance factor, because again, it's a little bit of a trickier, calculation. You're not going to be doing it, back of the envelope quite so much anymore. But if you have your information in the form, it can calculate all that for you and kind of takes that pressure off. There's a checklist for required submittals. It is anticipated to be acceptable by multiple AHJs, including US GBC or GBCI, in this case, the Green Building Certification Institute for LEED. I have not firsthand verified that GBCI will be accepting these, but actively work on many projects anymore. But again, the intent is that the state, the feds, the third-party programs will all accept the same form, so that you don't have to put all the information in multiple different places. So that is more or less the extent of the presentation. We have 18 minutes left here. So I was going to take you guys on a quick tour of the Energy Codes website, which is new, and poke around in the Excel file as well to kind of show you a lot of the helpful little things that it does. So let's see, if we're talking about guiding principles, again, this is really a part of all of these. Whether you're doing LEED or guiding principles or anything, you're most likely always going to have some sort of energy performance requirement. And this 90.1 fixed baseline should be helping you no matter what master you are serving. That's the whole point. So yeah, it's going to be a good thing no matter what. It's exciting new frontier in the land of energy modeling, and I think a lot of people are actually somewhat anticipating using the more newer codes, not because it will necessarily be easier. Again, performance is still harder, but the actual documentation should be a little bit easier. So I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to change it up a little bit and do my screen. Right. Let me know if you are having any problems. All right. So the first thing here, Building Energy Codes Program, fondly referred to as BECP. We all love acronyms, right? So they just got a brand new website. I think it was, I don't know, 6 months ago, maybe even less, during the pandemic. So this right here is our link to the actual codes, and I will drop it in the chat for everyone. There we go. And this is our performance-based compliance form. So it does come in a zip, which is problematic, and it does have macros, which is also somewhat problematic, but there's really no other way to do it. Before we get into those, I just wanted to kind of walk through. This is our homepage. We have, again, the com check and the res check. That is for just base energy code compliance. Again, that's just kind of going through the sections of 90.1, another important takeaway. We have the statuses. Let's see if it'll let me do it. This is the map, if you will, to all of the different versions of the state codes. We've got commercial and we've got residential as well. Again, the residential typically uses the IECC code. The commercial uses the ASHRAE 90.1 code. And there's nice little tables here that kind of show what it all is. There are certain states that have home rules, like Colorado, for instance, has its own custom rule. California, up until they adopted 2019, had their own home rule, but they've kind of come aboard. So this is, again, a nice little reference where you can just be like, hey, I live in Washington. What do I have to do? Oh, it's 2019. We're on top of things, or whatever it may be. Always a good little impact. Let's see, the determinations, these are kind of fun if you really want to get into the weeds. This is where we show the cost savings. We have site, source, cost, and carbon savings for each version of the code. So if you're curious as to where those numbers came from, that's all under determinations. I will say that the training section is also really good. You can filter it by, your ASHRAE trainings for all 90.1, but we also have the specific ones. You can get into like 2019 here. And you'll see when you kind of go into 2019, we have, 3 different slide decks for envelope, HVAC, and lighting, and each of these is, almost 100 slides, and those go through the specific changes in 2019 versus 2016. But again, this is most relevant for those who are demonstrating code compliance through prescriptive, ComCheck, ResCheck sort of stuff, or if you are interested in citing the code for a particular performance standard, like for renovations or a particular project. If you're just doing a lighting project, you can say, okay, I want to reference my project to just be for lighting 2019 or whatever that may be. So just a quick little tour. Wanted everyone to sort of see the resources that are out there. And again, if you're interested in diving a little bit more deeply into the changes of 90.1 or 19 versus 16 and 13, you have that there. But for the most part, for the context of this audience, I believe we're doing a lot of Appendix G modeling and trade-offs. So the PRM stuff is a little bit more initially valid. All right, so these are the compliance forms, and I sort of pulled us right to the end game here. This is sample data that they filled out in here, where essentially taking you right to the end. This is our compliance calculations tab, sort of down near the end of it. There's a bunch in here for compliance, where we show our PCIs and our PCI targets. The nice thing about this example is it is a mixed use building. So that means there is both multifamily and retail in this building, which again, if your building has 2 different use types, you are supposed to model them for the most part. There's whole sections in 90.1 that demonstrate when and why you would model two different types, but if they are different enough, you are supposed to model them separately. And so this will look up your building performance factors, and it matters a lot, right? Because in multifamily, our building performance factor is 0.74. So, okay, yeah, that's not too bad. We can do, 26% better than a 2004 baseline. But hey, our retail part, 0.51, we got to do, 49% better than the 2004 baseline there. That might be harder. Again, maybe it kind of depends. For retail, there's a lot of lighting, and lighting has gotten a lot better and so forth. So it might not actually be that hard there. But again, when you combine the two based on square footage, you have your PCI target here, which, there we go, ends up being 0.57. And so again, the calculation for demonstrating compliance is a little bit more difficult here, especially when you have multiple different uses, which is why, again, it's nice to get your data into a calculator such as this. And the point is, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is a comprehensive tool that already exists out there and has been beta tested, and is in, I think they're on version 50 or something of it, but there's, it's been through the ringer a little bit and can help out. So in this case, 0.57 is our target, and this is our weighted building performance factor, our target, and this is what we are hitting. And we are demonstrating a 23% savings over ASHRAE 90.1 2019. That is the difference between 0.57 and 0.75, which is our target. Oh, this is our weighed building performance factor. I think I gave you the wrong number before, but our weighed building performance factor is 0.69. So our PCI target is 0.75. So when we go back and apply it to our slides, this is what we're talking about here. So when the performance cost index is this sliding scale, remember, 1 being what a 2004 building would perform at. 2019, again, we didn't put specific numbers here because the PCI target matters in terms of what your building is, but for this case, the PCI target is 0.75. So that's, a 25% improvement over ASHRAE 90.1 2004 would demonstrate base compliance with ASHRAE 90.1 2019. And what we are actually achieving, our PCI, is 0.57. So again, 0.57 is less than 0.75. We comply, and it is 23.8. So do you understand correctly that PCI is based on cost? Yes, yes, it is based on cost. So cost is what ASHRAE uses in 90.1 Appendix G. It is based on energy cost. It is up to an authority having jurisdiction to base it on something other than cost, whether that be site energy, source energy, greenhouse gas, etc. But that is when, if you are going to base it on anything but cost, you actually would have to change your building performance factors to demonstrate the code equivalencies. So yes, energy reduction does not necessarily correlate. And this is a place where, there is potentially opportunity to show, additional cost savings or not, depending on the rates and costs that you model. Because as we know, this is all new buildings. You don't necessarily have, 12 years of or 12 months of energy data to say what your rates are going to be. You have to kind of guess what it's going to be. So most people use EIA published rates, whether your national or state, but you can use, a specific utility rate structure if you are anticipating that, and sometimes that can help your performance or hurt your performance. So very good question. So this is kind of the most important part of it. This is where, it pulls these from the basic information, but where you can look up your BPFs and PCITs. Again, this is also showing our, cost and energy savings and sort of breaking all that stuff down. All here in the, let's see, they call it compliance calculations. So quick tour through the rest of it. Instructions, always good to read. Documentation process overview. This is just a proposed flow chart, if you will. General information, this is where you start kind of putting in the stuff that matters. So this is one of the more important ones. This is where you are selecting your version of 90.1. It only exists for 16, addendum BN, and 19 because that's all it worked for so far. But you can actually change it for your minimum code compliance and above whatever. What it's based on, the simulation program, this is a nice little feature here. We have eQuest selected because you can actually copy paste your modeling results directly from eQuest. This is from your parametric analysis parms.csv file. You can literally copy paste it right in here, and it will then pre-populate all of the numbers. It also does that for Energy Plus, and but it has lots of different options here for the inputs of your modeling results, if you will, whether it's train or eQuest or whatever. Just that does end up sort of changing your results tab here to what you're putting in. And some of them are easy copy paste, some of them are not so much, but again, it is designed to take that information. But the sample form, which again, when you download this, it comes with a sample form and a blank form. It's always good to kind of poke around the sample form that does have eQuest results in it. So put in your breakdowns here. This is, the most important thing. But then you can put in your energy sources, and this has your rates. Again, there's demand, and here, this other sort of rates as well. Here we said we based it on actual rates, but EIA is also an option there you can sort of play with. Schedules, have it all in one place, your envelope assemblies. And the really nice thing about this is, you can put this information in and it kind of walks you through everything that you have to do. So when you are building your model, you can actually go through, and if you fill out this form as you are building your model, it tells you the information of what it should be. And it's a nice little feature in terms of just documenting and sort of doing it as you go, as opposed to just building the model and then at the end saying, oh man, I have to fill out all this documentation form and see if I comply and all that sort of good stuff. So you got your envelope, you got your lighting, you got your, place to do your actual lighting counts, which is always fun. See here. Where did I find the spreadsheet? This spreadsheet is on the building codes website. Do you have to enter all, or is there an output from an energy modeling tool? Yep, there's the output. I think we covered that. Okay, so we are at 1 minute left. I think we covered most of what I wanted here. The other nice feature about this is it does have some troubleshooting stuff as well, in terms of quality control checks, which is nice. And it will, give you pass and fail, and sometimes it even gives you, things to look at when and if you fail. So always a good thing. So again, I think that's all we've got time for today. The websites are there, the training stuff is there. That's me. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you ever have questions or want some perspective on what and why we are doing here. But ultimately, thank you everyone for your time.
All right, thank you so much, Eric, for your time, and this was a great presentation, very appropriate, especially the timing. Like Eric said, a lot of the information and links are available on the slides, and I'll send that out. I'll put that in our MS Teams folder, and if you're not part of the Army Corps, please feel free to send me an email, and I can send you a copy of the slides for your records. And this session is also recorded, so I'll also be posting this on our Army Corps Sustainability YouTube channel. So they'll be all available there too. So you can find those links. If you had a meeting invite, it should be there. If you have a flyer, those links should be available there too. So really, thank you so much. And if you need the slides, please send me an email. They'll probably be best. It'll be hard to catch everyone in the chat. So if you send me an email, I'll be able to do that shortly after this meeting. So thanks everybody again. Thanks again, Eric, for the great presentation. And you guys have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks everyone.